Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network, where we reflect on Wildbow's most unfinished work as it releases. We've got big news today, folks. It's Arc 24, Finish Off. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And even bigger news than that, arguably, we're coming at you live in the Discord. How's everyone's day going? Huzzah.
Huzzah. I don't think that is huge news. We do it every week.
What? You telling me we have bigger news than that?
We do. It's the last week to submit things for the fan art contest. So if you are a person who does the arts, you've got a week before it's all over. So get amongst it.
The arts, one of the most confusingly vague types of degrees that you can get. But if you've got one of those, the arts degrees, submit your arts at duffmedia.com.
What's arts plural? Because we've got some submissions already, and one's like a cool photograph. Like people have done songs before now.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't have to be a visual arts. It can be other arts.
Yeah. Hey Elliot, guess what? I'm going to one-up you again with an even bigger announcement.
What?
Which is that next week is going to be our talk about Finish Off. Next week is going to be our final episode for a little bit of time, for 2 weeks.
So we are going to be going on a handful of weeks hiatus because we're traveling to Hawaii for Malia's wedding, which is very exciting. But also the day before we leave is the 3-year anniversary of Pale. So we're going to do a special live recording and do a little segment at the end of that episode, kind of going over the last 3 years of this here story that we all talked about a lot.
Sorry, Wildbow, I'm just going to do a quick joke about it. 3 years, wasn't this story meant to be a short one?
Oh, that's a new joke brought to you by Pale Reflections. So the details will be on the Discord if you want to join the live thing. We're going to do some stuff. The discussion question links into this, so stick around to the end of the episode for that. But basically, what we want to hear from people. We're going to try and celebrate the first 23 arcs of the story next week, as well as the regular chapter that comes out.
Yeah. But there's one more big announcement, Elliot. Do you want to tell the audience, or do you want me to do it?
I'll leave this one to you.
All right.
Even though I know what you're talking about.
Which is that all of you who last week enjoyed us ripping into Elliot for having weird things like poo sticks that nobody else knew what the fuck he was talking about, stay tuned because there's going to be another one coming up in this episode.
Oh, I already know what this is. Okay. Well, fine, we'll do that when we do it.
That's just a little teaser. Just a little teaser for the fans.
I don't think I'm the weird one on this. Anyway.
Yeah, you never do. You never do, Elliot.
That's true. That's true. So should we talk about Finish Off 24.1?
Finish Off 24.1. Oh, what an arc title. I mean, I know we talked about this in a reflecting episode, but it is very classic, like Wildbow doing... I mean, I guess the other example I would point to is Summer Break, which was just such a great setup for an arc title. And obviously, Wildbow's done it again with Finish Off. It really is an arc title that just makes you go, oh shit.
Yeah. This is going to be the end of Act 2 of the story. I reckon we're about to hit the 2/3 of the way through the story point, I think.
Yeah. Then what's when we get to the final arc 32 or whatever, what arc title would you give that demonstrates? No, this time it's really ending.
It'll be Blood Run Hot, and we're bringing it full circle.
Blood Run Hot, interesting.
But yeah, no, I think it is. There was part of me that was like, is this a clue that this is maybe the final arc, or I don't know anymore? And this is why I'm doubling down on that prediction that I made in our reflecting episode earlier in the week. I think Pale is going to be making a statement about not ending in a normal way. And I feel like stuff like Summer Break is actually more evidence to that. This story has always had a interesting relationship with the concept of endings.
Yeah, I mean, Gilliam made that kind of explicit. Was it last chapter? One of the Musica chapter.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm sort of doubling down on the when this story does finish, it's not going to be like all the other Wildbow stories where it was very much an ending.
You know, it was one of my favorite arc titles. Arc 17, Gone and Done It. Remember when we
Yeah.
started that and it was just like, what the fuck is this arc gonna be?
Oh, and then people kept
Uh,
going and doing shit in that whole arc too.
yeah,
Like that arc had a lot of crazy shit get done.
it was very funny. That was the
Um,
parents becoming aware arc, right?
yeah, Kenneth got
Yeah,
found.
good
Massa
times. A
fucked
lot
around and
of
found out. Charles finally made his move.
yeah, arc
Yeah,
17. Yeah, they went
yeah,
and done it. Anyway, yeah, we're here to talk about 24.1, a Lucy chapter. Um, yeah, I mean, I realize now I'm looking at our notes, and our notes were basically just joking about the arc title, which we kind of just did. So
yeah.
let's skip that bit.
Well, so one other thing I did want to bring up from there, it's not really important or anything, but it was just kind of it was fun having a whole chapter that was just one person again. Like, we talked about it in the reflecting episode, but the back half of Go for the Throat, or like every chapter had at least two POVs,
Yeah,
and that was really fun. And made sense for the like Go for the Throat arc because it was all about like throaty connectiony stuff. But it was really fun getting back to this chapter and just like really deep diving into where Lucy's at mentally for a whole chapter.
yeah, yeah. It was great. I mean, Lucy is my favorite Kenneteer. I guess I legally have to say, and not say that she's the best Kenneteer. But yeah, it's really fun to be in her head. It's just like really funny. She's very funny in a very judgmental way, and we see that at the
Yeah.
opening of this chapter, because Lucy is kind of beaten down as all the Kenneteers are, and being forced to walk a path, one of her least favorite things, with a bunch of annoying teenagers, one of her least favorite things. It's great.
I will never get sick of how much Lucy fucking hates paths. Like, I think going on paths from Lucy's POV is even more fun than Avery's POV because,
Yeah.
like, through Lucy's, we really get to capture just the like unknowably fucking unpredictable chaotic vibes of paths. Like Avery kind of gets it and adapts and just goes with the flow, whereas Lucy is just like the metaphorical equivalent of stubbing her toe on every corner that she goes past. Like she just fucking
Yeah.
hates it.
I mean, there's this bit where there's like a lost other who's like made out of a bunch of birds.
Yeah.
And Avery and Verona are like talking about, oh, Avery's like, oh, she's blah, blah, blah. And then Verona's like, oh, she probably doesn't have eyes, so maybe this is the way that you have to deal with her. Lucy's just like, ugh, in the background, kind of
Yeah.
Darioing out with a bunch of teenagers.
Yeah, just like, I'm too old for this shit. Yeah, I think the other fun thing is then like the bird ribbon thing starts like talking and like Snowdrop and Avery seemingly understand it, and Lucy makes a whole thing about she tries to use her earring to hear it, and she still can't really understand it, and like overhearing shit she's not meant to hear is like her whole thing. So I think that's another really strong moment for just establishing how not in her element Lucy is on a path like this.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is very funny here is, well, I'll read out this quote. Lucy like sees, it's like Wallace and Braden and I think George, and they're kind of joking around a bit. And she thinks them being happy and easygoing is a good thing. We just have to find a balance. She's like talking herself down from yelling at them for being too happy in this situation.
Yeah, 100%. That's what she's doing. And yeah, like especially because it's a path. I think they're all walking around being like, "Whoa, this is so amazing!" Like there's
Yes,
like
yes.
clouds they're walking through that like taste like sea salt or something. Like there's all this fucking wild magical shit, and Lucy's just been a bit of a grump. Understandably, she's been
Well,
through some
yeah,
shit.
and
Um,
obviously it's a rough time at the moment, but also like
yeah,
this is exactly what I would be like if I'd just been introduced to
yeah,
magic, and kind of as we see, they're not quite grasping that this
it's
situation
serious
is
still.
actually still really bad.
Well, yeah, like they have the moment where they all come down the rope later on, and she gets a bit up like George because he's being all like whoa and like having fun, and it's like, this is like a memorial service, and it's like, well, you didn't tell him that,
Yeah,
like,
totally.
like, and I mean, yeah, like this is the like paths are like the most fun sort of magic, and they're also the most dangerous, sure, but it's like Lucy just at the moment isn't able to engage with the fun part, and I mean, I think we're going to get to talk about this a lot this chapter, I think, because like Lucy is, I think, in a really bad place, and that all comes to a head at the end of the chapter. So maybe we'll save most of it there. But it's like,
Mm.
We talked a lot last arc, I think, mostly about like Avery and Verona backsliding a lot and having to face like newer versions of their original traumas. And I do think we're seeing like this chapter, I think, weighs really heavily that Lucy is doing the same thing. Like the Lucy in the early story was kind of too all like resentful and all consumed by the fight and stuff. And I think there's a lot of room to think that that's happening to her again in this chapter. And like stuff like her not being able to enjoy this path is like an example of that.
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
also, sorry, it's funny that she said she doesn't like teenagers. She spent half this fucking story insisting people call her a teenager. Like just in terms of talking about like how she's not in a good place, she's suddenly all like, oh, teenagers. And it's like, you spent so much of this story saying people couldn't call you a kid, they had to call you a teenager. And now you're suddenly like, I don't like teenagers. Yeah. That was just funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I also want, before we move on, I also want to talk about how fucking tired and sore Lucy is. Like at the start here, she really brings up how like everything hurts like bone deep, like even the healing potions aren't fixing it. But honestly, it sounded like I was reading a Verona chapter with how at odds with her own body she was. And yeah, like I guess this is something Toadslow brings up later in the chapter, but I was just like, we just know Chucky got a huge power boost and is seemingly more secure than he was at the start of Arc 23. The Cannoteers are here; they're all fucked. Like we know, Verona and Avery also aren't doing so hot. Lucy doesn't really feel like she has much fight left in her. Where do they go from here? It's such a bad position. Like I think this is worse than where we were an arc ago.
Yeah, they're in a rough spot at the moment, aren't they? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like they're continuing to push themselves so that they can have enough energy to deal with this Charles conflict. And the only solution that they see is, well, when we beat Charles, it'll all be fine and we can, relax. Which is, I guess if it goes like that, that'll be good.
Yeah. But that's like a huge. How do you beat Charles at this point? Like the way forward there is incredibly vague to me at the moment. I guess they get into it later on in the chapter, so we can talk about it
there. Yeah.
Sorry. Also, a lot of the chat is calling out that hating other teenagers is a very teenager thing to do, and I guess that is a really good point. I just think it is funny because Lucy is very specifically requested to be called a teenager for so much of this story. Now she's like, oh, everybody hates teenagers.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of hating teenagers, there is this one moment where it feels kind of justified, where Brayden goes, oh, so she's a gang member, and then looks at Lucy, and Lucy is rightfully annoyed at this, being like, we grew up in the same area, like, why would I know more about gangs than you?
I mean, I think we all know why he thought Lucy.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's pretty dumb by Brayden.
Yeah, it was definitely like, why did you guys bring Brayden?
Yeah.
On the other side of things, though, I think Mia takes what might be the biggest L in the whole story so far. When Lucy thinks to herself, it's when she says, I don't really like teenagers that much. Even Mia, who is okay. And like, we've just spent the last few weeks seeing how ride or die for Lucy Mia is. And Lucy thinks she's just okay. Like, poor Mia.
Yeah, it's it's a real smackdown.
Well, yeah, that's F's in the chat for Mia, I think. Yeah. So people are talking about it's the same as how she treated Wallace, which I guess is a good comparison. We should also talk about Gashwad, who is here continuing to be the pinnacle of comedy. Like we talked about it a lot in our reflecting episode, but watching him just go through all of this nonsense in this chapter, like he hangs onto that rope for like 20 minutes because he just refuses to use his weapon form. Like it's so funny. Like he's trying to turn himself into this Shiv teleport boy, and yeah, like I guess because something we didn't talk about in the reflecting episode that I thought about after it is like Toadswallow has said in the story he and Bubblegum did work to make their weapon forms match.
Mm,
So goblins have some ability to adjust their weapon form. So if
yes.
Gashward's is embarrassing or something, he could ask Toadswallow for help changing it. But of course, it's Gashward, so he fucking won't, and he's doing this dumb shit instead.
Yeah, he's an interesting one, isn't he?
I think what's really fun. I think Gashwad is like a fun kind of anti-Lucy in a way, or like they complement each other quite well because War doesn't want anything to do with Gashwad, but he's fucking desperate to be in War's clutches. He's trying to turn himself into a discount dog of War right now. I actually kind of hope Gashwad and Lucy are going to start like bouncing off of each other and like being in scenes together a lot because he's a fun contrast to her, and that he's someone who's desperately trying to get into the grips of War, whereas Lucy has a much more complicated relationship with it.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's an interesting point.
Yeah, I reckon there's a lot you could do with Gashwad and Lucy becoming friends.
Mm, yeah. Well, I guess we'll have to see if that happens.
Yeah. God, there's so many bits to talk about from this path too. There's also when we meet the noose lost people. So there's like a family of lost hanging from nooses, and this great bit where Connor like whistles to get the attention of some of the teenagers, and a bit of like some of those lost get startled, and Connor's just sort of like, "Oh, sorry, I'm just like wrangling this group," and the dad of the noose family like nods his head in response. It's just like this universal dad moment. I thought that was so funny.
Yeah, his dad energy is so strong that he even kind of dads the other family of Noose Lost. It's a good moment.
Well, I think it comes after this moment where Avery is like, "Oh, lost are people too," and then Brayden kind of puts his foot in his mouth again and is a bit like, "Oh," because he sees the noose people, which is actually
Yes.
kind of a little bit fair. That sounds like a confronting sight.
Yeah, totally. For someone
But it's
very new to magic, yeah.
yeah, but it's sort of like, oh, these are people too, and then Brayden is like shocked at their kind of horrifying appearance or whatever, and then 2 seconds later we get this bit where like him and Connor are just like, how do you do, fellow dad? And it really reinforces Avery's point that these are just people.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's good fun little beats in a somewhat depressing chapter. It's nice to have them.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of comedy in this chapter, like surprisingly. But on a different note, there's also the bit where I think you already talked about it a little bit, but most of the teenagers haven't realized that the conflict is still going. They thought that fight at the diagram was the whole thing, which idiots. But like Jeremy's like, wait, is it still going? And Oakham's like, it's always still going. There always seems to be something. And it's like
Maybe
Jasmine's
one day they'll get to take a break.
yeah, but it's like Jasmine's in this conversation too, and I had this reaction. I was like, Oakham, that's not helpful. I mean, you're not wrong, but like you're not helping.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I mean that is a thing, and I think it's a timely reminder as Lucy's about to make the decision she does at the end of this chapter. It's like there's always seemingly more fight to do.
Yeah. Maybe one day they'll get a break. We'll talk about that more at the end, I guess. Yeah, so then there's this moment where Sylvia asks this question that I think is really good, which is, if Avery's thing is exploring this sky place and Lucy's good at sword fighting, what's your thing? Trying to kind of get to know Verona. And Verona's like, let's talk about this later. I can't,
Fuck off, Mom.
Yeah, not right now. Which is, I don't know, a bit harsh to Sylvia. Like, this is, I think, Sylvia doing exactly what Verona seemed to want previously, but it's just not in the zone right now, I guess.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? Because it's like, this feels like, Sylvia's had such trouble reaching out, and this feels like her trying to, and Verona just swats it down immediately. It made me think of, do you remember when Lucy and Verona were fighting a lot in like arc 12 or 13, and Verona had that comment about how like when she yells or speaks out in an argument or something, like that's a big deal for her. Like that was one of the differences between her and Lucy, right? Is Lucy will call out bullshit immediately, whereas like if Verona is kind of putting her foot down and chucking a tantrum, that means it's a really, really big deal for her. And I couldn't help but think the same for Sylvia here. I feel like this was actually a big deal for Sylvia. Like it's pathetic. She just asked a fairly basic introductory question. But I feel like for Sylvia, this was probably
a
Sylvia
big,
probably put a lot of
yeah,
into this. Like this was a big deal for Sylvia to ask this, and Verona's just like, oh, no.
yeah.
And yeah, like Sylvia, I don't really think speaks again after this. Like she's still taking stuff in. Lucy takes note, but
Mm.
like she absolutely takes a step back. And this is, that problem Verona and Sylvia have had the whole fucking story is that both of them need somebody to basically push them into each other's arms.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I hadn't thought. I mean, my initial reaction when you said that was that you were being harsh to Sylvia, but then I was like, no, that's probably fair. Thinking that Sylvia had put in a lot of thought into asking this question, which is not like incredible. It's just like a good
No,
step.
but she's just bad at this. And like, the other side of it is Verona, like, literally just dragged her into all this with the things like, sorry, but I'm going to force you to be a mum or whatever. And then got even more bad news on the shit night she was having and now just isn't in a position to meet her mum halfway at all. So it's like a shit situation for Sylvia to have ended up in that it's like now, like she's been dragged into this, but also, I mean, I guess we talked in the past about how the awareness are fun because it's kind of an inversion of the parental dynamic. And like
Mm,
Verona is kind of Sylvia-ing her mum a little bit here by being like, here's the world of magic. Okay, bye. I'm not gonna help
mm,
you with this at all. And like, that's not a super fair comparison. Like, there's nuances to it, but like,
yeah.
Sylvia and Verona are really demonstrating here how they're two sides of the same coin. And Jasmine and Lucy are going to do that at the end of the chapter too.
Yes, I like that. I like that thought. It's a good one.
I mean, yeah, and like just speaking of Verona, I'm super interested to see where she goes from here because, like, I mean, she's gutted by the loss of Mal and Anselm and all that, and like, I don't know that this is a hurt or a pain that can be like just turned into a big swing practice save the day type thing. Like
Mm,
this is a genuinely massive, huge loss that you can't just like undo by creating Kenneth Found, right? Like, I it's gonna like on top of the Sylvia stuff. I don't know how Verona copes with a loss like this, and that's going to be fascinating to see.
mm, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't
Um,
know. I hope it. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, we'll have to see. I guess.
but in amongst all this doom and gloom, so when Verona shuts her mum down, Lucy kind of comes and backs her up, and that's a really nice moment. And was one of those things where
Mm,
it's like Lucy, I think, is very good at like handling Verona here. As she comes up and she's like, "I can talk if you want to talk, or we can just hang out." And then Verona is able to express that she needs Lucy to keep people away from her, which is good because apparently Carolyn and Jeremy tried to make a fucking move at one point, which would have been a fucking disaster. Um, but like this was the exact problem Lucy and Verona had back in summer break. Is like Lucy didn't know when to stop pushing, Verona couldn't communicate at all. So as much as I'm kind of dooming and glooming about where they both are and how they're both backsliding, there are still moments like this where it's like they're a lot better as a team than they were 13 arcs ago.
mm, yeah. Yeah. It's true. They've um they've grown a lot together, and yeah, I guess Lucy's awareness of Verona in this situation and kind of reading that is a pretty good
Mm,
marker of that. Yeah.
100%.
Um, so yeah, the gang dismounts from the path, taking a long escape rope. They're at the BHI, and there's lots of bodies here. Killwagon, some dog tags, and Ramjam is dead with a hole in his head.
Looks like somebody nailed the hammer on the head. Am I right? Pew 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 pew.
2, 3. Okay, so let's talk about it. So this, the backstory to this. Elliot, you made this joke in your live read about
Yeah,
somebody nailing the hammer on the head.
and it did not get the attention
No,
it deserved for an off-the-cuff comment, so I thought I'd reuse it.
yeah, nobody reacted. And then you brought it up again last night and you said, "Oh, make sure you set me up so I can use this joke again." And it kind of came to light. The expression "nailed the hammer on the head" is not one that I had ever heard before. My reaction was, do you mean hit the nail on the head? Which is exactly what the expression actually is.
No. There's also an expression, you nailed the hammer on the head.
I just don't think there is, Ellie.
You can Google it.
Okay, alright. Nailed the hammer on the head. Here we go. Nailed the hammer. Okay. I mean, I'm pretty sure you faked all these Google entries.
No, like it admittedly says it's rare. What I think is interesting is the only pronunciation of this one that's on offer is the Australian one.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking maybe this is just proof that I'm more of an Australian than you, and you should hand in your citizenship or whatever.
I really think what it proves is that there's maybe a very local expression to, I guess, Armadale in Australia where you grew up that is just local to that area only, where the people there don't know how to say hit the nail on the head and instead fucked it up and then had to retroactively justify it by adding it to Wikipedia.
Okay, but all I'm saying is that if we, there's two separate arguments here, and I just want to settle the first one because we can do that very quickly. If we accept that nail the hammer on the head is an idiom, then my joke is very funny, and we can all agree and pause for laughter.
Ha 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 ha. Yes,
Thank you.
I agree, but it just when I read it in your live read, and I'm sure the reaction from everyone else was, "Huh?" So yeah,
I thought this was more common than it is.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not.
I just want to say, hopefully the comments will agree with me again, because we got a lot of comments saying people had heard of poo sticks. Admittedly, I think it was all of our British listeners and nobody else, so it might just be a Brit thing.
Yeah.
In fact, there's world championships, somebody brought up, of poo sticks.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, world championships in air quotes, that means, it's just people from this local area, and actually nobody else sends a representative.
Yeah, well, it's like the World Series in baseball, right? Like, America keeps calling it the World Series. They don't invite anyone else. It's like... I think the World Championships in poo sticks are probably open to anyone in the world who wants to come. It's just nobody's making that trip.
Yeah. I like what Zachary is saying in Discord chat here, saying that on their island, they use the word malicious colloquially to mean overly curious, which is just a very funny, specific reinterpretation.
And I could see how that would lead to a lot of confusion with people not from the island.
Yeah, you come in asking questions, being really malicious. Like,
yeah.
Am I?
Sorry, I did not mean to come across that way.
Yeah, that's funny. It's funny stuff. But yeah, lots of others are dead. So, which is the saddest, Elliot? I think I'm saddest about Killwagon. He seemed pretty chill. The VP dying, pretty sad as well.
Well, it sounds like Killwagon's going to get better. That's what Lucy thinks. So,
well, yeah, but I guess boogeymen like heal up or whatever, like dogs.
There must be a cost though. Like, surely it costs him something. Like, the Abyss might have a stronger pull on him and want him to kill people more or something. I don't know. The vice principal moment is obviously very sad. I'm very sad to see her go. We're never going to get that play that she was organizing, which hurts. But also, can we talk about the moment where her steed is sitting there crying? Did that make anyone else feel kind of weird and conflicted? Because it's like touching, but also their relationship was pretty fucked up, right? Like,
yeah, but it was quite it was quite goofy to me. I think it was like kind of
I know, but there's some Stockholm syndrome shit right there that he's crying for the vice principal, isn't it? Like,
no, I don't know. I don't think you can apply those kinds of like human psychology dynamics to it, right? But yeah, I mean, the fact that the vice principal died in a kind of like avenging anger for the people from the Undercity was pretty rough to hear.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that, like, you know, I'm making jokes about Ramjam's death to cope because I got really viscerally angry reading this part for the first time at like the fact that they still had the collars on, and just that reminder that like Ramjam and Buddy and a few others died while like enslaved and fighting their friends. Like, I've seen people speculate, and I think they're probably right. It sounds like it may have been a dog tag who had to kill Ramjam, and that's so fucking like, fuck Charles. I'm you know, I'm changing teams. I'm no longer Team Charles as of now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it genuinely just makes me like I feel. And this is what's fun about the ending of this chapter. I feel very Lucy-ish, just like how outraged I am at the injustice of like Ramjam having died fighting his friends. It's so fucked up.
We've got a few dead dog tags or bound dog tags as well. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough stuff. And then to make it worse, we get Biscuit in here pretending to be sad just to try and push her
Fuck
wares
you.
on people. She is the worst goblin.
I don't. You know, you don't really believe that. You're just trying to shitstorm me, and it's working.
Just pretending to be sad as a way to try and push drugs on people. Biscuit, you're the worst.
This is how some of us cope, and it's
The,
healthy.
the text is explicit in here. It says, a miserable looking Biscuit. She wasn't actually miserable. She was just looking like she was miserable, okay? So, it's confirmed. It's canon.
I hate you. Speaking of Biscuit, though, okay, I do want to litigate something else. I'm just going to ignore all of that nonsense.
Yeah, sure.
Now, in our sword moot, which I keep forgetting you weren't actually here for, but so in the sword moot, it was established that Ram Jam is the best goblin. Obviously, that point is now he can no longer be present tense.
No,
present tense, the best
canonized
goblin.
as the best goblin, Saint Ramjam. You know what I mean? Like,
okay, so well, I guess I'm curious to hear from the live chat as well. Yes, I'm easily impressed. I know that you won, but I'm saying now I feel there's room to relitigate it now that he's not with us. So
we can't relitigate the best goblin, but we can litigate the best living goblin. You know what I mean?
Okay, I guess I'll save that for all packed up too.
I
can't go back to saying Biscuit is the best goblin. Then is what I'm hearing
for many reasons. Yeah. Hey, can we talk about how Rook just fucked off?
Unbelievable. Like,
oh, Rook, what a character.
I do have to admit, like, I kind of hope this is real because this fandom has spent every year at this point tinfoiling about what Rook is possibly going to do and when she's going to make her move. And the idea that she just isn't is fucking funny.
I think the idea of Rook never coming back into the story after this is so hilarious. Like, and maybe we'll get like, Rook set up this thing to happen or whatever. But I just think it would be so funny if Rook's big plan was just to kind of hang around, be like, oh, maybe I'll join that side, maybe not, and then leave when she realized she wasn't really doing anything.
Yeah, because there's a lot to be said for how this war kind of left Rook behind. Like, we used to talk about that a lot more back in like Arc 17, but like I remember even Guillemette was making fun of how behind the times she was.
Yeah.
So like, it would kind of still work thematically for her to have not done anything and then left just because she realized she couldn't keep up with this fight. And then it's also just funny because like I was when I read this, I was like, but wasn't she doing some anti-domain thing for the Sable maybe? Or like, wasn't she doing XYZ? And Marissa said they done all they had for the night. So she's done something, right? Like the copium I had at the idea that she was just going to not fucking do anything was so good that now I want it to be that because it's the funniest outcome.
It is very funny.
But sorry, I before we move on from all the dead gobos, I really love this idea that they talk about where for some of them, they're going to let them live on as their weapon forms. Like, I didn't know that was an option, but it's really cool that like Ramjam might live on as a hammer in the market or something. Like, it's just beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
Like, I want that. I don't want to be buried. I'd pick cremation at the moment, but if there was a way to like, well, actually, I've said in the past, I want my body to be fed to sharks, but apparently that's illegal. But like, I'd love something like this. If my dead body could get turned into a hammer or something, that'd be cool as shit.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Pretty funny, the idea they'll turn these dead goblins into weapons and then kind of trick people into taking them and using them for dumb things as a way to live on. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. I'm just thinking like if you could get like a goblin who turns into a sword and then like respect them and keep them close to you by keeping that sword on you at all times, stuff like that. Like that, it's just a cool way to let someone's memory live on.
Yeah, definitely. Hey, speaking of dead bodies, Mr. Gill, Donnie's dad, right?
Yeah.
He died, which I don't even know what the ramifications of that are for the Negatives, but I'm sure it'll be nothing good.
Well, it sounds like Donnie might have partially done it. Like, they talk about how he was there and didn't really help his dad, and because he was all abyssified thanks to Kira Lynn. Like, but this is just like, I know that we say this almost every week, but I was like, man, that's a bit of a line crossed by Charles's team, right? Like, yeah, that's crazy. And yeah, like the second Donnie doesn't have the abyss in him anymore, he's going to be a fucking wreck. Like, this is crazy.
Yeah, it's, yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, the optimistic side of me is like, hey, maybe this will finally make the Negatives realize they're doing the wrong thing. But then, of course, I know that's not going to be the case.
Well, we saw part of Donnie on the phone, and he was like, he felt trapped. Like he didn't want to be there, and then he got abyssified so that it wouldn't hurt him emotionally. And it's just like, I have a feeling now about half the Negatives when they come down off this abyssified high, if they're allowed to, are going to be like, I mean, like this is a fucked up, drugging up child soldiers shit is what they're doing with this abyss stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, amidst all the sadness and loss, there is some hope and joy. Gilkey's back, and then Lucy is able to help Nibble calm down a bit. We get some nice kind of chill moments.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention. But back with the Gobbo stuff, there was a fun humor to the funeral stuff there. Like, everyone was like tapping Buddy's butt to make it wobble like jelly, and like I really loved how every goblin, and in fact every person in this chapter who died, gets their own like sort of their own way of being remembered, I guess. Like that is another silver lining in this chapter. Like Gilkey is a more net positive thing, but I thought it was really touching the way Kenneth respects how everyone died. Like Ram Jam gets really nice stuff and everyone says he's great because that was his energy, whereas everyone kind of makes jokes about Buddy because that was his energy. Like it's just nice and helps that part of the chapter be less of an absolutely shattering bit because Goblin and yeah, like Biscuit walking around giving out alcohol is just a little bit funny. Like the whole thing. I think goblins somehow make it a very emotional moment, but also add a bit of levity.
Yeah, definitely good to release some of the tension of this. This first part of the chapter before we get to the tense end of the chapter.
Yeah.
But
yeah, Gilkey. Gilkey is the one just straight up win in this chapter. That was just the one part where you're just like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, it's good stuff. He's like a dude. He's like, yeah, it's just nice. This is the most like, I don't know, non-toxic that we've ever seen him.
Yeah, he says he's better than he was when we first met him. And there's also potentially Winter is willing to take it further. There's just costs associated with that, so like it's up to him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if we ever go back to Thunder Bay at some point, I can't wait to see Gilkey there again. Hopefully, he's heading back there.
Yeah, I hope so.
Also, speaking of silver linings, I know I gave my whole speech last week about the box that Mariska's in being bad, and I stand by that. And I don't think it's good. I think it's more punitive than like
rehabilitative,
or whatever. But I did have a little chuckle at learning that Mossa is in there with her. Like again, not helpful, terrible thing. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, but suck it, Mossa. That's pretty funny.
Hey,
apparently I could feel two completely contradictory emotions about this.
Yeah, depending on how much you hate the person.
Yeah, like I always felt more sorry for Mossa than hated him even at his worst, but it's just like it's the box of play stupid games, you won a stupid prize, isn't it? Like, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so
we got Chloe and Nibble too. This part, this was the most heartbreaking part of the chapter for me by a long shot. Like, Chloe is so sweet about all of it, and it's that makes it worse that she's like trying to be so upbeat and positive.
Yeah,
and just Chloe and Nibble, they're such a fucking tragedy. Like everything about them, it's just them taking turns getting fucked over by the universe. They're like I know Wildbow's mentioned that they're based on characters who are in that City of Woe story he talked to us about and all packed up. And you can really feel some of the City of Woe in just how like tragic their lives are.
Yeah, it's rough. These poor ghouls.
I was so happy when Lucy gave Nibble her phone and put the TV on. I'd forgotten that he was a TV ghoul, and I loved that. I loved that bit.
Yeah.
Sorry. Before we move on, and this is just to lay seeds for the big thing at the end of the chapter, which is I assume why Wildbow included it in as well. Lucy has this funny moment where Grandfather is a bit like, "Oh, I want to go rescue the other dog tags," and Lucy's like, "That might be a suicide mission." He's like, "Well, I'll probably do it anyway." And Lucy starts to get really like, worried, and this makes her a bit upset that he would do this. And I was just like, fuck, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, huh? Like, we've got a fucking lineup of worried concerns here. Like, Jasmine's worried about Lucy, Lucy's worried about the dog tags, and the dog tags are worried about the captured dog tags. Like, it's just this fucking line of people doing shit that everyone else doesn't want them to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, like
it's pretty
Lucy's
funny.
relationship with the dog tags is so similar to her mum's one with her. It's I can't imagine that won't be a thing going forward.
Well, I mean, Lucy and her mum are so similar, right? Like that's
Yeah.
what makes their relationship so interesting is they're both so similar.
Yeah, but I don't think Lucy sees that at all, and Jasmine might to an extent, but like I don't think either of them really appreciates. I'd be interested to see if Lucy ever clocks onto the fact that what she is going through with the dog tags is exactly what her mum is going through with her.
Yeah. But yeah, so they've kind of assessed their losses. The team plans for the next step. They've got a secret plan they're putting in motion and definitely keeping secret.
This is so good.
It is very funny. It's a very funny tension release that this fucking duck mask lost just blabs the whole thing.
Yeah, I like what a funny way to do exposition. I remember we used to talk about this a lot in Deep Impact. Like, Pact always found fun ways to do exposition in a novel way. And this is up there for what a Wildbow's best. Like, to have it be a thing in the story that this character doing this info dump is ruining it is fucking funny.
Yes. The character shtick is ruining secret plans. Like, God, that's funny.
I guess, you know, it's also, I was just like, oh, it's a cool plan. Like, I'm glad I hadn't really pieced together like a lot of what, you know, the duck dumps on us. And I love this plan. Like, I think we've talked in the past about how replacing the concept of a Carmine really seems to be the only sensible way forward. And that seems to be what Kennett's trying to do. Like, with this whole thing of like dishing out consequences and just trying to make violence less incentivized in the region, you kind of weaken the Carmine.
Yeah. It's so yeah, I mean, I guess do we I feel like we were kind of more or less on top of parts of this plan, right? Like,
yeah, but it hadn't all been spelt out like this. So thanks, Duck Lady.
No, yeah, it was good for it to kind of be all put together. So we had it as like okay, now we know what the deal is. But yeah, like as a plan, what do we think?
I mean, I love it. I love the idea of like I hadn't realized it was sort of still so localized. Like, the idea is mostly Kennet is this awareness hub, but the idea is they're using their connections. They're going for the throat to get their protections extended. So they're not trying to convince the whole province to suddenly be anti-capitalist like Kennet. They're just using their connections to basically get their alternative laws recognized in foreign territory, which is just such a great, perfectly Kennet way to go about spreading a new system. I love it. The wrinkle, as Totoro continues to bring up, is the fact that Charles has just flooded this place with violent creatures.
Yes. Yeah, which reminds me of the conversation from 1 or 2 chapters ago.
Yes.
With what's his face about
Mr. Knox, yeah.
With Mr. Knox about getting him to stop doing that and being like, there's no way that you're going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the interesting thing is technically if Kennet is the only home for this, maybe they only need to protect Kennet right now. And then if they get the deals from all these other places, you can slowly start to do these expeditions and branch out. But if they can secure just Kennet, they can start on this plan. So like maybe we need to change the stakes a bit, and it's just about making sure they get jurisdiction over protecting Kennet.
Yeah.
I also wanted to bring up one of the first things you mentioned a bit ago was how like they assess the dead. Like, Lucy basically makes a point of visiting every single person who died in this conflict and like giving them a moment of consideration.
Yes.
And it's a really cool thing to do.
Yeah, it's a good moment for them, isn't it?
Yeah, and she explicitly calls out a connection that I'm glad was made explicit because it would have gone over my head, but she specifically calls out that dog tags are formed when this doesn't happen when you just let there be nameless hordes of undead, and
Mm.
that's bad. And which is interesting because it's like obviously Lucy fucking loves dog tags. Like, she's on dog tag number 2 familiar candidate. But like that there is a whole aspect to dog tags of like we shouldn't exist because it's a sign that war has gone too far. And I guess, like, again, as much as I feel like the theme of this chapter is largely doom and gloom for how Lucy is doing with succumbing to war, there's like these moments like this where she is still doing it in a better way. Like, this is a good thing to do. It's hard and it sucks and I hate it, but it's so good of her to make sure every combatant who died gets a moment.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, it's very sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so then we get to the end of this chapter where they kind of have a moment to litigate whether they've already done the bit where, the Kennedy others would go off and fight, the Kennedys would do a plan, and then that would be their last hurrah, which in fairness is exactly what just happened. So I can
Pretty
see that
much.
side of the argument, but then also it was also kind of presented as you'll get, in air quotes, one last fight, one last chance to get Charles, which they didn't really have, right? Like, they were basically just defending themselves.
They hadn't done their plan yet because they got distracted by everyone dying.
Yes.
So yeah, like, I think it is kind of deliciously ambiguous. I think you could make a compelling case either way, which is the best situation for something like this.
Yes. So of course, if there's ambiguity, in comes the old practitioner lawyer Lucy to resolve that ambiguity, and she says, "Take away my magic over my forsworn body." Yeah, I don't know. It's rough. Jasmine clearly is not happy about this.
I mean, fair. Like, this is kind of fucked, right? Like, I mean, I think what's really fun about this is I find it really hard not to agree with Lucy. Like, we spend so much of this chapter looking at this death and destruction, and I was so angry at Charles that, like, there is a huge part of me that is like, fuck yeah, Lucy, we cannot stop now.
Yeah.
But then also, like, again, in terms of Lucy backsliding, some of her worst tendencies, like, I feel like there was a whole thing about Jasmine thought that Lucy was becoming Wars, and there was arguments that she wasn't because of her relationship with the dog tags or whatever, like, blah, blah. This is an extremely I belong to war move, if you ask me. Like, and yeah, like, the fact that she outwardly is, like, defying her mum as a part of it is... It just doesn't feel good. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I can't wait to see where both of them go from here. This is going to be big. Like, I remember in 23.a, one of the big things Jasmine said was that she thought Lucy would pick her over Magic, but she didn't want to do that to her. Now not only has that happened, but Lucy has picked Magic over her mom. Like, that's fucking intense.
I mean, it wasn't explicitly set up as that choice. I don't know, but yeah, it's not good.
She did though. Like, like, I feel like the subtext of that moment is Lucy is saying she's picking this war over her mom. I kind of hope Jasmine goes and gets Booker. I think that would be fun. I'm living for this family drama stuff at the moment. I'm like, yeah, we can get back to the war with Charles whenever, but I want to see Sylvia stuff. I want to see Jasmine stuff. That's the real shit I'm invested in right now.
Yeah, for sure. It's good times. It's good times at the moment.
Yeah. And I am really interested to see where the Jasmine Lucy stuff goes, because I think, like, the big thing here is Lucy is always saying, like, well, Lucy is saying, I need to keep this fight going. Like, I need to keep up this fight. And obviously we do have people like Jasmine questioning that. And I guess, like, that has been, like, that's like a core thing in Pale, right? Is Pale constantly wants us and the characters to ask, like, should we be fighting this fight? I think that's been there since the start of the story. And almost, I'd argue Pale is maybe almost saying that you should always be asking that question. Like, if you think about the difference between Team Charles and, like, Woke Kennet, is that Woke Kennet will continue to ask this question of themselves, whereas Charles never questions whether he should cross this line to do his thing. And like the follow up, like the war that we're seeing here is kind of when Kenneth met Charles at his level, and they had to. Like, I'm not really criticizing the concept of this war because I think it may have been necessary, but like the thing about fighting someone like Charles is he forces you to go down to his level, and we've seen all this loss, and it's like part of me is like, well, now we need to make sure he suffers for it, and then the other part of me is like, well, do you need to? Is this where you need to call it? And I think I can see Pale actually trying to really investigate that question because it's what so much of this story has been about, and I can't wait to maybe see some of that.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, and of course, it's going to be centered through Lucy, who's always been the person who was too willing to go for that fight. Or she was getting better, but now she's struggling with it again.
yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. I don't know. I mean, like, what would the awareness even do in this situation? I have no idea.
I mean, there is a greater power of the region right now who's traditionally been pretty chill with Forsworn people. So, Jasmine could cut a deal with Charles.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh.
Forswear your daughter and cut a deal with Charles to make it less serious would be a fucking series of events. I don't think that's where it's going to go, but that would be funny.
Yeah. But that's the end of our chapter. Anything else to say about this? It sets up pretty fun stuff. They're going to go fuck Charles, and the parents are not happy about it.
Yeah, I don't really have a concept for where we go in the very, very short term in this story. Like, Lucy's back into planning mode, but like, how quickly are they expecting to jump back into fighting? Because there's a lot of shit to deal with back at home too. Like, Pale has sort of had this cycle of going between like big combat and then like a cleanup arc. Like arcs 8, arc 14, arc 18 have all kind of been in recuperation, reconsolidate Kenneth arcs. And arc 24 feels like I don't think we're going to get off that easy. Where it feels like we really need a recuperation realignment arc, but they don't have that because they're about to go fight again. Like, I don't know which one it's going to be. Maybe both. Like, this is exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's the chapter.
Yeah.
Arc 24 finish off is off to a hell of a start.
Yeah. Should we get into some Pale predictions, Elliot? Predictions from the community left in our Pale predictor form.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with mine, which is from Steve R., which is quite a funny prediction that I quite liked, which was that Charles deceived London. They call him up and they say, have you made a decision? And Charles is like, yeah, 3 of the 4 judges are in agreement, but never actually says what they're in agreement of. So Steve R's prediction is that Charles has kind of tricked London, saying, no, the 3 of the 4 judges that were in agreement that we weren't going to take the power, but you've already given it to us, no takey backsies, so we don't have any obligations to you now. Which is, I mean, like, I don't know if I agree that that's what would happen, but I do think it's very funny.
I think the no takesy backsy would be a tough
would be
call
the
to
issue
make.
with that one, yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like if London figured this out, you're gone. I was trying to tinfoil the other day, but I don't know enough about Canadian history. But I know like Canada didn't used to belong to England, and then at some point it did. And I was like, is there some funny historical parallel between Charles signing up to be London's bitch and like what happened with Canada moving from France to England? But a cursory glance of Canadian history did not reveal if there were fun parallels there. I don't know. I do think. I think we talked about it last week. I'm still kind of tinfoiling that Charles is cooking something we don't know about, just because I think traditionally that is what he do. And I don't know if he's really going to be deceiving London or anything yet, but like I think something like this is in the right direction. The idea that like Charles is not just planning on sitting on his throne with London's power.
Yeah. So which prediction did you pull out, Elliot?
I put out a prediction from Giles Zahl, who is basically reminding us that the Alabaster Assembly has promised a chunk of power to the Kenneteers. I think at the time she said that they could just get it directly from Charles, but I think Charles has paid her back now, so technically it'll be on her to give it to them, I think. Anyway, Giles Zahl brings up that this could be a great alternative source of power for the Kenneteers if Kenneth does cut them off.
Mm.
Um, and that would kind of fit with the Alabaster Assembly's mandate of, empowering the powerless and giving them a chance to fight despite odds against them. So the idea that the Alabaster Assembly could become the Kenneteer's new Kennet, I think, is um, a fun idea.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. It can be a kind of ace up the sleeves, I suppose, which is a cool
Yeah.
thought, especially if the Kennet others get a earful from Jasmine and do decide to take away the magic.
Well, and this could be a great ace up their sleeves, because I don't know that anybody outside of the Sable and the Alabaster would know this. In fact, I don't even know if Lucy's told Verona and Avery yet. Um,
Mm.
but like, this is like, they can seem like they've lost all their power and then quickly call in the Alabaster and get a huge temporary juice up. Like, that could be pretty great.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, folks, for leaving your predictions in our Pale Predictor form. You can find that linked in the show notes down below if you want to leave a prediction and potentially be proven right about how this
Yeah.
story might end.
Now that we're definitely in the final arc, it's the last chance.
Yeah, and the more we say that, the more true it is. But yes, so the other thing we've got to get to is our discussion question from this week, Elliot, which I think was a really good one. I really enjoyed reading everybody's stories. It was what's the closest you've come to an encounter with another or being aware? Which I just think is a great excuse to hear some weird ghost stories.
Yeah, pretty much. And so, I mean, yeah, let's get into them, because these were fun, and I love speculating on how this maps to the other verse. Like, on that note, I really wanted to start with Propaganda Pagoda, who
Mm.
thinks they may have run into a dream controller, which I don't know if that's an actual Otherverse thing or something, but um, basically, the night their grandma died, Propaganda Pagoda had this like really strange dream. They met their sister, who's significantly older than them, and their grandma in this kind of weird dream space that was also like kind of grounded. They compared it to like lucid dreaming, but they weren't lucid; they were still in a dream. Anyway, they'd
Mm.
only actually met their grandma once, and in their dream they could tell something was weird, but their sister was like distracting them, and they were doing all this cool art shit in the dream, like changing the colors of space and time and shit. Anyway, and then eventually Propaganda Pagoda realized their grandma was dying, and the sister took care of them anyway. They woke up, and then there was all this weird stuff afterwards where it was like people rang to tell Propaganda Pagoda's sister that the grandma had passed, and she already knew. And then she asked about Propaganda Pagoda's dream, which they could have heard about from somebody else, but it sounds like the obvious thing that's going on here is that Propaganda Pagoda's sister is a practitioner.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that's got to be it. But no, I think it's a classic, the same dream story, right? I think I've had one like this where my younger sister and I both had the same dream, but it wasn't like surrounding a family member's death or anything. It was just the same dream involving like a car crash into a tree. It's just like a classic
Yeah.
thing to happen when you're growing up, I think.
I had a recurring dream of crashing my parents' car, like, because
Mm.
we lived on a hill, and I had this same dream like every night for about a month, where
Mm.
I would get into the car, turn the brake off, and roll the car down. And we lived right up the street from a hospital, and the car would crash into the hospital, and then I'd wake up.
Mm.
And like some nights my sisters were in it with me. Anyway, it got to the point where I was like afraid of getting into the car for ages.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's a thing, but that was terrifying.
I remember the recurring dream I always used to have when I was younger. I guess it was a nightmare, but it wasn't. It was like I was being chased up the steps of a lighthouse by, I think, Frankenstein. Like, I guess it was a nightmare, but it was never that scary. It was just kind of like, I guess, like
Annoying.
inconvenienced. Yeah. But then one time, I can't remember exactly how, but I like beat Frankenstein. You know what I mean? Like, I would have this dream maybe.
Is that when they ended?
Well, yeah, then it ended. So I
Oh,
had it
cool.
maybe every 2 months or so, right, for a while, and then I think I like dropped something on him, or I pushed him down the stairs or whatever, and then I never had it again. It was great. It was
I
such
think
an interesting story.
I think you killed your local Alpy. Is what happened there. I think
Oh,
you
now I
killed your
feel
local
bad,
nightmare.
especially because like they weren't like I was never like getting injured or that scared, so they clearly weren't like
Yeah.
malicious. They were just
So
kind of dorky, and I guess accidentally killed them,
you're a terrible person.
or
Yeah,
they got
yeah.
reassigned or something. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, right after taking a serious tumble down the stairs, they suddenly got reassigned. Like just like my pet moved to the family farm.
Mm.
Um, yeah. So speaking of lighthouse, I cooked up some great from tinfoil. I'll tell you about that after the episode, obviously. But just remind me to tell you about my from tinfoil about lighthouses.
Mm.
Um, sorry, getting back to the discussion question. Ace of Sword had this story that I love for the kind of benignity of it, where they basically put this mug down and then it kept moving after they put it down and let go of it. And there was like
Mm.
a very detailed analysis of all the probable explanations and why they don't quite work.
Mm.
Um, and I loved this for how much analysis had been put into like what could very easily Ace of Sword was open about this be explained as just a small visual hallucination because it was late at night and they'd been studying. But they the effort put into this one was great.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. The thing I find hilarious about this one, I think, is that if we buy into the premise that it was a other or a ghost, or whatever, like, what was the purpose to do a kind of
Like
very
gaslighting?
mild spook once and then never again? Yeah, but gaslighting, I feel like needs more, needs more consistency or repetition.
Yeah, I'm thinking of what was her name? The goblin who has the human boyfriend and was like a bump in the night and did stuff with
Mm.
Verona.
D.
Yes. It sounds like her thing, but maybe she was only there for one night
Oh
and
yeah,
then
she was just passing through.
yeah, exactly. So she kind of did that, and then it was like, oh, and then she heard about a better place or something and moved on, and just like it never went anywhere. It was like maybe the original plan was like every night it would move just a little bit more or something.
Mm. Yeah. Um. So, this one really got me. Ripper 1337, who saw a will-o'-wisp, a ball of light in their family's apartment. They were kind of standing in the hallway. They saw this ball of light that then zoomed off, kind of not illuminating anything around it, and just vanished. And I don't know why, but that one's the spookiest to me. I think will-o'-wisps are kind of, I mean, I'm sure they're just some kind of like audio or visual hallucination, but still kind of spooky, very spooky conceptually.
This is how I learned that will-o'-wisp isn't just a Pokemon move.
No,
It's a thing.
It's a thing. It's a thing.
I was like, why? You saw a Pokemon move? I was like, the graphic changes every generation. What are you talking about? Yeah, this is one of those great, like, I like, this is why I used to lurk on Ask Reddit back in the day, because I love reading ghost stories like this. Like, this is fun.
Mm,
I have no idea how to explain it, but you saw some sort of echo.
yeah, yeah.
We've got Key Influence 1493, who had two stories. One from their mum, who had a supernatural encounter with this local type of owl that has a funny name, which is Moorpork. Isn't that the city from?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, it's not just me. Anyway, this owl just like would not let this person's mum and their friend go down a specific street. And then later on, they learned that there had been a car accident on that street when they would have been walking down it. So that's like clearly, I mean, I don't know who this owl was, but that's some other who's got their back, like like maybe a local practitioner's familiar stopping innocence, because you don't want innocent victims. If the victim of the car crash was a rival practitioner, you don't want innocents getting caught up in that, right?
Now, let me play devil's advocate on this one and say, from the wording of this story, the mum was never in any actual danger because
of the owl.
No, I'm realizing now that this sentence is ambiguous. Maybe it's different. It says they later found out that a car accident happened down that street after they'd gotten home. So I assume that meant the car accident happened after they'd gotten home. But maybe
well, no, that would be an interesting story.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say it doesn't really make sense.
I assume since they told this story here that it meant that the car accident must have happened around the time they would have been on that street.
Okay. The second part of Key Influences, which was them seeing a panda across the stream in a place where, like most of the world, pandas just don't kind of freestyle hang out.
You guys don't have pandas?
Yeah, we have, kangaroos and pandas. They're the two local wildlife we have here in Australia. No, but I do love the idea that, like, a panda escaping a local zoo or like a private exotic animal collector or whatever. Like, if that happens, then it's just like fodder for unexplained supernatural experiences. It's just kind of funny. Like, I kind of want to dress up in a panda costume and wander around my streets at night to create an urban legend about, the panda of Marrickville.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's already that big cat in Parramatta, right? Or no, Penrith. I don't know. It's Western Sydney.
Yeah.
I also love the idea, because I think this is the thing, is like key influence goes over animals that they think it could have been.
Yeah.
Like it could have been a pig or something, and their brain just saw panda. But I like the idea that really applies to others too. Like if this was some ugly goblin that was just kind of black and white, then the spirits like went into this innocent brain, and they're like, oh, it's a panda. You saw a panda.
Yeah. It's funny. It's a funny story. Which else? I liked... Oh, yeah. Only a Sandwich had a really interesting story, which was about they would always have a recurring dream about being in their grandparents' house and them having an extra room that was always in a different spot, and they would kind of always have this dream where they would have to find the extra room and it would be in a different place in the house.
Yeah.
And then one night they found it, and it had a big kind of, like sunroof kind of thing, and them and their grandparents and family was all in there looking up at these kind of stars that they felt this. Well, I'll read out the quote, I guess. As I stepped into the room, I could feel them touch my mind, and I knew that this was the aim of the extra room, to open the way to influence us, this house, the world. As I resisted the assault on my mind, I watched helplessly as my brother succumbed, rising into the air, turning brilliant white. He sang a song which had no words, but I could feel the meaning. The stars are coming. I never had that dream again.
What
very well
Magnus
written
Archives
story, I know.
Shit.
Really well written story, but also it was all a dream, so you can kind of very easily explain it away in that one.
Yeah, that was great. Like I would listen to that Magnus Archives episode.
Yeah,
like 100%.
It was very well written, very spooky.
Like, do they still do the thing where fans can submit Magnus Archives things to get read? Like they're not officially canon, but they're like kind of half canon.
They're leading up to season 2 now, so best time to get in there and try and get a spot as a. Sorry, not season 2, because they've done 5 seasons. Yeah, series 2. That's what I mean.
Yeah,
good time to get a spot writing for Rusty Quill. Anyway.
I liked Hobo Demon's answer, which is nice and short and sweet. They went camping, or they were staying in a cabin, and they were trying to get their wife. I think it was their honeymoon. They said, yeah, it's their honeymoon. They're in a cabin. They were trying to get their wife to read Pact, which is really the best thing you could do as a partner, I'd argue. Anyway, and then this goblin showed up and tried to eat their
trash
food. Yeah, because they didn't dispose of it properly, which is, I remember that's the thing you have to do over there. It's weird. Anyway.
We better start thinking about that while we're in Hawaii, disposing of our trash properly so the Hawaiian bears don't get us.
Yeah, Well, no, aren't there like giant millipedes and shit over there? I'm low-key terrified of that.
Oh, that's cool.
Anyway, but yeah, basically, Hobo Demon's mind made them think that this goblin was just a black bear. And I can think of what might have really happened here, but it could have been a goblin.
No, I think it was a goblin, and Hobo Demon had the chance to befriend a goblin, but never landed it, unfortunately. And then we had Ghostly Bird, who had one story that was about them when they were young, going to kind of see Mars and Jupiter, and they saw Mars, but it probably wasn't Mars, but they don't know what it was. But the second story I really liked, which was
sorry, that was such a shit delivery of that story.
Well, I wanted to
Mars
get to the
was meant
one.
to be visible to the naked eye, and they saw something that was way bigger than Mars should have been. I have a feeling maybe Ghostly Bird just forgot looking through a telescope when they were a kid or something. But yeah, they saw something above the moon that was much bigger than Mars should have been.
But the second one, they got lost on a street where they should have known what street it was, and that was a story that I really liked, which was
this. It was an undercity trip, is what it was. It's
Yes.
exactly what George went through.
Yeah, so they kind of walked down this route that they had to kind of take a turn, a different turn, and they were like, "Oh, we kind of lost." And then when they got to the end of the street and looked back, they realized, no, actually, that was a street that we've been on many, many times before, but for some reason we just didn't recognize it. Which, I mean, they mentioned they were drunk, so again, a plausible explanation here, but also just kind of a really cool idea of getting lost in a street you should know really well, and then looking back and being like, oh my god, wait, what? Like, that moment would be so... Yeah, they mentioned it being really disconcerting, which I think is a very funny idea.
Do you think... Okay, sorry, this is a bit of a tangent, but hear me out. I've got my new big tinfoil for the Otherverse, which is it's practitioners and others that have made alcohol such a thing because it makes their job so much easier. Like,
That's
Prohibition
funny.
was actually an anti... Like, that was some witch hunter shit
Yeah.
where they were trying to make everyone more aware, but like practitioners and others want everyone getting drunk all the time because then it's so much easier to just be like, mate, you were drunk.
Yeah, so they started a bunch of speakeasies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's hilarious.
Because, you know, they always say like Prohibition failed because alcohol is like so easy to make. Maybe it didn't used to be, and there was some like global alchemy bullshit that just made alcohol way more present. Because
alcohol,
like,
alchemy,
yeah, oh my god,
the clue's
oh fuck,
right
we cracked
there.
it. We cracked it. Yeah, the spirits went along with it because it makes their job easier. Like, this is the tinfoil that Pyre needs to address.
It is a very funny tinfoil idea. I do quite like it. But yeah, some great ghost stories in here. It was really good to keep us keep us well tided before this series 2 of Magnus Archives kicks off.
Yeah, and I think it's for as I said, I used to love going on to like Ask Reddit or like r/no sleep and reading ghost stories, and especially the ones where people would post like real ghost stories and you try to debunk it. And I think it's fun, instead of trying to debunk it, trying to otherversify it.
Yeah, totally. But we've got a new discussion question this week, Elliot, and it relates to the fact that we've got our 3-year anniversary episode next week.
Yeah, so we're asking people, what is your favorite Pale moment or character or detail that you don't think would be in most people's top 10?
Yeah, the more obscure things that you really love about Pale.
Yeah, and you know, you can chuck those in the Reddit thread. You can also bring them live if you're going to make the recording. Again, the details on that recording will be in the details of when that recording will be are on our Discord. But yeah, essentially we're going to be going through the whole story, all 23 arcs, kind of doing so. We want to pull people's stuff out when it's relevant. So tell us, what are your favorite Pale moments that you think slip through the cracks?
Yeah. So do that. You can find the link to a discussion thread in the show notes down below, or of course come to duffmedia.com/discord and you can join for the live recording.
Yes, especially if you're European or Australian. I apologize to our American listeners, but for scheduling reasons, it's not the best time for Americans.
Whoops. But yeah, so in the show notes you can find the link to our discussion thread where you can leave your discussion question answer, or just discuss this episode in general. Who were you saddest about when they died?
The answer
Biscuit.
is Buddy McButtbutt. No,
I was
Biscuit will never die.
When Biscuit didn't die.
Don't forget to check out our Twitter, and maybe one day we'll get to see Blue Sky on there too. We'll see.
Living the dream when we switch over to Blue Sky.
And we'll post memes every day on Blue Sky. That's guaranteed.
That is 100% the truth. If you want to check out more shows on the Duff Media Network, you can head to duffmedia.com, as I've mentioned a few times, to find the Discord link, but you can also find all the other great shows on the Duff Media Network. I think on the Duffcast this week, they're talking about the D&D movie, which I read has just broken even from its budget and marketing costs. So
I've just started.
Thumbs up to them.
I've just started that episode because I saw the D&D movie at the start of the week, and that's the most fun I've had in the cinemas in years. I love that movie. It's great. I hope they make many more.
Yeah, D&D in this context stands for delightful and domestic box office gross.
Of course. But yeah, I've just started, and they've got Michael on that episode of the Doofcast, who is just like, The bit I'm up to at the moment is currently him and Scott are having a big argument about the MCU and whether this movie is like the MCU, and it clearly is.
Michael,
and Michael's
the
just refusing to admit
Armand
it.
White of the Duff Media Network.
And so I'm enjoying having Scott in the episode to lose his mind at what Michael is saying alongside me in real time.
It's good stuff.
But yeah, great movie, and go check out the movie and then listen to that Doofcast episode.
Yeah. If you want to support the Duff Media Network, you can head to patreon.com/Duff Media. You get all kinds of cool perks for becoming a patron, but the best perk of all is that warm feeling you get for knowing that you're helping a team of small independent dweebs put out podcast content each and every week.
Speaking of Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow, you can help the big dweeb.
Okay, yeah.
He's the big time,
but still a dweeb. That's the point you're trying to get across, is it, Elliot?
Apparently, yes.
Yeah.
No, I mean, obviously, you put money in, you get pale words out. It's a good system, so donate to Wildbow if you can.
Yeah, the Kennedys are going to need a lot of coins to put on the eyes of their fallen allies at the moment to help them cross the river Styx. So make sure you head over to Patreon so you can supply those coins.
That makes it sound like the more coins he gets, the more characters he can kill off.
I like that. No, it's the more coins he gets, the more characters. They're going to die anyway, but some of them aren't going to get to have a good afterlife unless you donate to Wildbow. So get over there, give him your coins, or else who knows who's not going to make it across.
Just imagining an epilogue where it goes to hell, and it's like, these are all the characters who are being tortured because you guys didn't donate enough.
Didn't donate enough money. Yeah, I mean that would be an incentive structure. Like, who's everyone's favorite character? I will give them a shitty death and afterlife unless you donate enough money. I don't know, it might work.
This is one of the reasons that we're not hit authors.
It's such a corporate vibe, isn't it? Yeah, I can imagine.
No, Zachary's right. We've just reinvented the Catholic Church.
No, I think it's going to be like, this is what's going to happen in like Disco Elysium 2 or whatever. Now that whole thing has gone down, it's going to be like, you like these characters, huh? Well, donate money or else.
Yeah. Aziza Dizzit brings up a great point, which we should reiterate. The views of Pale Reflections do not reflect the reviews of Wildbow.
We're independent. We can do what we want. That's the whole joy. Anyway, thanks for joining, everybody. Folks. Goodbye.